I've always been drawn to places forgotten by time, where every cracked wall and empty street whispers secrets. In these abandoned Mexican towns, it feels as if time has stopped, and maybe the people never fully left. Dust clings to your shoes, shadows shift where they shouldn't, and a strange stillness presses against your chest. Visiting these towns makes you wonder, what happens when a whole place disappears, but its echoes remain, watching, waiting? If you're fascinated by abandoned places and real-life mysteries, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Traveling Guide Hub. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. 1. San Juan Parangiricutiro. The air hung thick with the scent of charred earth, but what unsettles visitors most isn't the lava, it's the feeling that something here never left. From the moment I stepped onto the blackened fields, a faint hiss of smoldering ash carried whispers that didn't belong to the wind. Even the solitary church tower jutting from the hardened lava seemed to watch me, its jagged shadow crawling across the uneven ground, as if reaching for anyone who dared walk too close. A subtle, inexplicable weight pressed against my chest, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not entirely alone. San Juan Parangiricutiro was founded in the 16th century and grew into a thriving agricultural town in Michoacan, Mexico. Generations of families farmed the fertile soil, and life revolved around the church through everyday rituals, weddings, festivals, and prayers. That life ended abruptly in 1943 when the Paricutin volcano erupted unexpectedly in a nearby cornfield. Over the next 9 years, lava flows, toxic gases, and layers of ash gradually buried the town, forcing every resident to evacuate. Today, only the church tower remains, jutting stubbornly from the hardened black rock, a silent witness to lives interrupted. Visitors recount experiences that defy easy explanation. One guide recalled a young woman freezing near the church ruins, eyes wide and trembling. She swore she heard a low creak of a door opening, followed by hurried footsteps behind her, though the field stretched for miles with no one else around. Her pulse raced. She refused to move forward, insisting the air felt alive and heavy, compressing her chest. A lingering smell of smoke clung to her hair, though the lava had long since cooled. Even now, she questions what she saw. Was it memory, imagination, or something that never left the town? Even in daylight, the place exerts an unnerving pull. Some hear distant bells or soft whispers that vanish when turned toward, the crunch of footsteps where no one walks, or a sudden chill that creeps into the bones. Shadows shift oddly across the jagged terrain, and then it stops. Nothing explains it. The air grows tight and strange, leaving visitors instinctively alert, unsettled, unable to look away. Locals warn against lingering after dusk, though they never say exactly why. As the sun dips and shadows stretch over the blackened lava, the silence thickens, and the church tower looms darker, sharper, almost alive. And when night falls, no one can say what truly stirs here, waiting beyond sight. What are you willing to risk finding out?
2. Mineral de Pozos. A bitter wind cut across the empty streets of Mineral de Pozos, carrying the faint scent of rust and dust. Then came another layer, an odd metallic tang, sharp and almost like old blood. At first glance, it looks like any quiet rural town, but the silence feels alive. The broken windows of abandoned houses stare like hollow eyes. A single weathered sign swings without wind, clanging sharply. And somehow the town seems to remember you, waiting to see how you react. Founded in the late 19th century in Guanajuato, Mexico, Mineral de Pozos thrived on gold and silver mining. For decades, miners and their families filled the streets with life, schools, churches, and homes echoing with laughter, work, and prayers. By the 1920s, the veins of precious metals began to run dry, and residents slowly abandoned the town. Streets and machinery froze in time, leaving a silence born from years of hope slowly drained away. You can almost feel the weight of generations gone, their lives lingering in the shadows of rusted gates and crumbling walls. Visitors often report encounters that defy explanation. A photographer stepped into an old schoolhouse one sunlit afternoon. The air was normal, but then came the unmistakable scratch of chalk on a blackboard. Dust swirled as if unseen hands had written moments before. Her pulse jumped, skin prickling. She stumbled back, refusing to move forward, insisting the air felt alive, pressing against her chest with a force that made her stagger. For minutes she lingered at the edge of the street, trembling, unsure whether she had glimpsed memory, imagination, or something the town itself preserved. Even now she questions what truly happened, and whether returning would be safe. Even in daylight, the town's unease persists. Rusted gates swing open abruptly, shadows twist oddly across walls, a sudden chill seeps into bones. Then it stops. Nothing explains it. A lone door slams somewhere behind you, echoing for no reason. Each step feels observed, every instinct alert, and the mind hunts for an explanation that never comes. Locals caution visitors to leave before nightfall, though they never explain why. As the sun sinks, jagged silhouettes stretch over the ruined streets and yawning mine shafts. The town inhales with the wind, the abandoned mines staring like gaping mouths. When darkness descends, no one can say what still lingers in Mineral de Pozos, waiting silently in the shadows. What would you do if it noticed you?
3. Misnabulum. A heavy, humid breeze rolled over the cracked streets of Misnabulum, carrying a sickly sweetness that made the skin crawl. The air was thick and sticky, pressing against me like an invisible hand. Then came an unexpected sound, a slow, deliberate drip somewhere inside a collapsed building, though no rain had fallen. The houses leaned at odd angles, windows black as hollow eyes, and deep within the walls a creak echoed, as if the town itself shifted with memory. Something here is wrong, and it notices you. Misnabulum thrived in the late 1800s on the Yucatan Peninsula as a hacienda town, its economy built on henequen plantations. Families worked together through harvests, festivals, and daily routines, creating rhythms that bound generations. But disease and economic hardship slowly drained the town's life in the early 20th century, leaving homes and streets abandoned almost overnight. Nature reclaimed the town aggressively, trees sprouting through roofs, vines crawling over doors. But even in decay, the walls carry the weight of human life, whispers of the past etched into their bones. Visitors recount unnerving encounters. A photographer entering the main hacienda felt the air shift instantly, sticky and heavy. Then came the sharp crack of a cane striking stone, followed by hurried footsteps echoing across the courtyard. Her heartbeat skyrocketed, chest tight, and every instinct screamed to flee. She froze, unable to move forward as the air seemed to press against her with deliberate force. When she finally escaped into the sunlight, she saw muddy footprints trailing toward the building, though it had been empty. Even now, she wonders if she encountered memory, imagination, or something still alive within the town. Even in bright daylight, Misnabulum resists calm. Rusted gates swing open without wind, shadows crawl across walls, doors shift on their hinges. A sudden chill wraps around you. Then it stops. Silence so heavy, it makes you question whether you're alone. Each distant sound, drip, creak, gust of wind, feels amplified, a reminder that the town watches. Locals warn against staying past sunset, though they never explain why. As night falls, trees and ruins merge into a single looming shape, eyes unseen following every movement. The humid air thickens, the shadows stretch, and when darkness finally descends, you realize the question isn't whether the town notices you, but what it will do if it decides you shouldn't leave.
4. Guerrero Viejo. A faint rattling echoed across Guerrero Viejo as I stepped onto the cracked cobblestones. At first, I thought it was the wind, but the noise came in short, sharp bursts, like metal scraping stone. The air smelled faintly of burnt wood and dry earth, sticky under the heat of the afternoon sun. Buildings leaned at odd angles, walls pocked with holes, windows staring like hollow eyes. Somewhere deep inside, a slow creak echoed, almost as if the town itself shifted in memory. Visitors say it isn't the emptiness that unnerves them, it's the sense of being watched, and here, that feeling comes alive. Founded in the early 1900s in the state of Chihuahua, Guerrero Viejo sprang up around rich silver and gold veins. Families built homes, churches, and schools, and the town thrived on the rhythm of mining life, festivals, and the shared hope of striking it rich. Miners whispered about hidden veins and cursed shafts, local superstitions that kept some areas off limits even during the boom. But by the 1940s, the mines depleted, and the town slowly emptied. Streets and buildings became silent witnesses to generations who once lived and labored here, leaving echoes that seemed to linger in the wind. A guide once shared a chilling experience near the old chapel. As he explored, he felt a sudden icy brush along his arm, though no one was nearby. Faint murmurs in rapid Spanish drifted from the chapel doorway. Heart racing, chest tight, he stepped closer, and the voices stopped abruptly. Later, muddy footprints appeared, leading toward a collapsed wall, though no one had entered. He refused to return after sunset, still unsettled by the sensation that the town itself had reacted to his presence. Even in bright daylight, tension remains. Shadows twist along walls, rusted gates swing open, and small rocks roll across streets with no visible cause. Then, just as suddenly, everything stops. Silence becomes almost tactile, pressing on the chest, amplifying every sound, drips, creaks, gusts of wind. Locals warn against lingering after dark, though they never explain why. As the sun sets, the buildings merge into a single looming presence, swallowing shapes in darkness. The shadows stretch, the burnt scent thickens, and one realizes the question isn't whether the town notices you, but what happens to those who ignore the warning.
5. Quechula Church. In the heart of Chiapas, the ruins of Quechula Church rise from the dry Grijalva riverbed, jagged and stark under the afternoon sun. Built in 1564 by Dominican missionaries, the church once served a thriving colonial town. Villagers gathered here weekly for mass, festivals, and markets, their lives woven into the rhythm of stone walls and wooden pews. But in 1773, catastrophic flooding forced the town to empty, leaving the church partially submerged for decades. Now it stands like a ghostly monument to lives erased by nature, its jagged arches casting long, uncanny shadows. Even in daylight, something here is wrong, and it notices you. Running my fingers over the rough stone, the air thick with damp earth and decaying vegetation, I paused as a sudden clatter echoed from the collapsed bell tower. No wind stirred, yet the sound rang sharp and metallic. One local guide told me of a tourist who once felt a tug at their sleeve while resting inside the nave, though no one was near. They turned quickly, heart racing, only to find shadows pooling in the corners.
Later, muddy footprints appeared along a half-buried altar, though no one had entered. The visitor refused to return after sunset, shaken by the sense that the church itself had reacted. Daylight does little to ease the tension. Sunlight glints off fractured stone, revealing faint faces etched into the walls by centuries of moss and decay. Water drips from hidden crevices, echoing in hollow chambers. A sudden chill creeps across your skin. Distant bird calls pierce the quiet, clipped and oddly human. Then, just as abruptly, everything stops. Silence presses like a living weight, amplifying every creak, drip, and rustle. Locals warn against lingering after dark, though they never explain why. When night falls, the crumbling arches merge with shadows into impossible shapes, and the riverbed reveals parts of the nave like skeletal ribs. The damp air thickens, footsteps sound hollow, and the question becomes chillingly clear. What secrets linger where centuries of prayers and abandonment collide, and who is left to witness them?
6. De Real de Catorce. A sudden silence hit as I stepped onto the dusty streets of Real de Catorce, almost unnatural after the clatter of my own footsteps. A distant bray echoed, though whether it came from a horse or the wind I couldn't tell, and it cut sharply through the thick, dry air. Shadows pooled unnaturally in narrow alleys, and the sun glared off whitewashed facades, yet some corners seemed darker than they should have been. The town felt alive, aware of each visitor, watching, waiting to see how you would react. Founded in the late 18th century in San Luis Potosí, Real de Catorce flourished as a silver mining hub. Miners' homes, churches, and cantinas lined cobblestone streets, and the town thrived on festivals and market days. By the early 20th century, however, ore ran scarce and residents slowly abandoned their homes. Today, while a few locals remain, much of the town stands frozen in time. Ghostly streets whisper history through crumbling walls. If you pause, you can almost hear echoes of laughter, hammering, and hurried footsteps long gone. A guide shared a chilling story of a photographer exploring an old chapel near the hills. They noticed faint scuff marks along the floor, though no one had passed that way. A sudden gust carried the faint scent of burning wood, and the temperature dropped sharply, sending chills across their spine. When they tried to leave, the door wouldn't budge for a moment, though nothing blocked it. The photographer later described the feeling as if the town itself had decided to trap them, just for a heartbeat, reminding them that Real de Catorce remembers. Even in bright daylight, tension lingers. Crumbling walls lean as if listening, broken shutters clatter in the dry wind, and shadows stretch in impossible angles. Then, just as suddenly, everything stops. Silence presses, dense and suffocating, leaving only the faint echo of your own heartbeat. Locals caution against wandering after dusk, especially near old mines and chapels. As the sun dips behind the mountains, shadows merge into the streets like dark rivers, and one can't help but wonder who or what still moves through Real de Catorce when no one is watching, and what do they want from the living?
7. El Oro. The first thing you notice in El Oro is the metallic tang in the air. It's sharp against the warm sun. The streets seem narrower than maps suggest, alleys twisting at impossible angles, as if the town itself refuses straight lines. Roof tiles hang precariously, windows gape like surprised eyes, and somewhere distant, a chain rattles against a doorframe, even though the wind is still. Locals say visitors rarely step onto the main street without a shiver, because the town feels like it's observing, waiting, testing your courage. El Oro was founded in the late 1700s in the state of Mexico,
built atop rich gold veins that drew miners from across the continent. The town thrived for decades. Cafes buzzed with conversation, schools rang with laughter, and festivals lit the streets with lanterns and music. But by the mid-20th century, the mines depleted and wealth drained away. Families left one by one, leaving behind houses with doors swinging open in forgotten courtyards and shops frozen in time. The silence isn't peaceful. It carries the weight of generations abruptly gone. A photographer exploring the old theater described an unnerving sensation. The floorboards creaked in rhythm with his heartbeat, though he was alone. A sudden, cold gust swept through the hall, carrying whispers he couldn't understand, and a wooden chair tipped over just a few steps away. His chest tightened, and his skin prickled as if the walls themselves were closing in. When he stepped back outside, he realized muddy footprints had formed behind him, leading toward the balcony, though no one had followed. He refused to stay after dusk, the memory of that invisible presence clinging to him. Even under the harsh afternoon sun, unease persists. Rusted signs sway slightly, though the air is still. Shadows bend unnaturally, and a low hum seems to rise from the abandoned mines nearby. Then, abruptly, it ceases. Silence lands like a weight, pressing against the shoulders, amplifying every distant clatter, every imagined whisper. Locals warn not to wander near the mines after dark, though no one admits why. As twilight descends, the town's outlines blur, rooftops merge into jagged silhouettes, and one cannot help but wonder what lingers here among the empty streets and hollowed buildings, and who or what remains to watch the living pass through.
8. Santa Rosalia, Old Mine Area. The first thing that hits you in Santa Rosalia is the acrid smell of rust and scorched metal, mixed with the faint tang of salt from the nearby desert soil. The old mining structures lean at improbable angles, their skeletal frames groaning softly in the wind, as if exhaling decades of labor and neglect. A single wooden pulley swings slowly on a derelict shaft, clanging against the metal like a warning bell. Locals whisper that visitors often freeze mid-step, convinced the ruins themselves are watching. Here, the weight of the past feels alive, pressing, patient, and impossible to ignore. Founded in the late 19th century, Santa Rosalia grew around rich copper deposits that attracted workers from across Mexico. Families built homes, schools, and a small church. A thriving mining town pulsed in the desert heat. But by the 1950s, copper production slowed dramatically. Mines closed, businesses shuttered, and residents drifted away, leaving streets lined with empty houses, sagging roofs, and silent workshops. The town's industrial skeleton became a ghost of its former bustle, while the desert slowly reclaimed the land. A geologist exploring the old smelting plant recounted a chilling encounter. As he stepped over fractured metal plates, the wind carried a faint metallic scraping, though the air was still. His boots crunched over debris, and he felt a sudden icy brush along the back of his neck. Looking up, he noticed shadows in the rafters shifting unnaturally, though no one was there. Moments later, a heavy wooden door banged shut, startling him into retreat. When he glanced back, he swore he saw faint footprints leading toward a collapsed smokestack, footprints no one could have made. He refused to return after sunset, the memory of the place lingering like a phantom weight. Even in the harsh daylight, unease clings. Dust swirls in the corners of abandoned warehouses, rusted machinery rattles unexpectedly, and the sun casts long, impossible shadows across cracked streets. Then, abruptly, everything goes silent. The desert heat seems to thicken, pressing down on your shoulders, amplifying even the smallest creak or whisper of wind.
Locals warn travelers not to explore the old mine shafts after dark, though they never say why. As twilight falls, the skeletal frames of buildings merge into jagged silhouettes, smokestacks become shadowed sentinels, and one cannot help but wonder what echoes through these empty halls, and who, or what, continues to claim Santa Rosalia when the living leave.
9. San Antonio Huertas. The first thing that strikes you in San Antonio Huertas is the sudden chill, almost unnatural under the afternoon sun. The town sits nestled in a narrow valley, its adobe walls sun-bleached and crumbling, roofs sagging under decades of neglect. A faint metallic clang echoes across the streets, though no wind stirs. Every doorway gapes like a dark mouth, and the long shadows of collapsed chimneys stretch unnervingly along cracked cobblestones. Locals often warn that the moment you enter, the town remembers you, and the weight of history presses like a hand on your shoulder. Founded in the late 1700s, San Antonio Huertas thrived as an agricultural and small-scale silver mining community. Families tended fields, churches held mass, and festivals brought the town to life in the valley. But recurring droughts and the depletion of nearby silver veins forced residents to leave gradually throughout the 20th century. By the 1960s, the town was all but abandoned, leaving behind empty homes, broken fences, and the skeletal remains of barns. The valley's silence now carries a haunting resonance, as if the life that once filled it still lingers invisibly. A visiting historian shared a particularly unsettling encounter. As he wandered past the old chapel, the air grew inexplicably heavy, sticky against his skin. A sudden scraping sound echoed from a nearby alley, followed by the unmistakable sensation of something brushing against his arm. Heart racing, he glanced toward the alley. Empty. When he stepped forward, faint footprints appeared, leading toward a collapsed well. He recalled the sound of faint, hurried whispers in Spanish, though no one was nearby. Shaken, he left quickly, reluctant to remain until sunset, feeling that the town itself had acknowledged his presence. Even in bright daylight, unease is palpable. Broken windows reflect shifting sunlight like watchful eyes, rusted tools rattle in abandoned yards, and shadows seem to bend unnaturally along walls. Then, abruptly, everything stops. The silence is heavy, almost tactile, amplifying the smallest creaks and sighs of the valley wind. Locals caution travelers against staying past dusk, though they never explain why. As twilight descends, the town's adobe facades merge into jagged silhouettes, the empty streets seem to contract, and one cannot help but wonder what lingers in San Antonio Huertas when the living leave, and who or what still walks these quiet streets after dark. 10. Teotihuacan. The first thing hits you before you even reach the Avenue of the Dead, the weight of centuries. The air is dry, carrying a faint scent of dust and sun-baked stone, yet there's a strange stillness that feels almost alive. Pyramid shadows stretch unnaturally across the plaza, shifting with the sun, and the distant echo of footsteps, though no one is near, creates a subtle, unnerving rhythm. Locals whisper that Teotihuacan remembers all who tread its stones, and for the visitor, that memory presses invisibly, demanding attention. Founded around 100 BCE, Teotihuacan became one of the largest cities in the ancient world, a hub of trade, politics, and religion in Mesoamerica. Its pyramids, sun, moon, and feathered serpent towered over a meticulously planned city, streets lined with temples, palaces, and bustling marketplaces. By the 7th century CE, the city mysteriously declined. Reasons remain debated among historians: internal revolt, resource depletion, or environmental shifts. What remains today are the monumental ruins, silent witnesses to a civilization whose lives, rituals, and secrets have long since vanished. Visitors often report a peculiar sensation near the Pyramid of the Moon, A tour guide recounted one archaeologist pausing mid-climb, suddenly chilled despite the heat, claiming the shadows shifted in ways they shouldn't. Others have felt a tug at their sleeves, like invisible hands guiding or warning against wandering too close to certain chambers. Some swear faint chants or footsteps echo through empty plazas at dusk, leaving the hair on their necks standing. Every encounter is brief, fleeting, and unresolved, yet leaves an impression that the city itself is aware, patient, and observing. Even under the blazing sun, the ruins exude unease. Cracked stones radiate heat that feels almost sentient. Columns and walls loom like silent sentinels, and the wind seems to carry whispers across the avenue of the dead. Then, abruptly, everything falls silent. The absence of sound is so tangible it presses against your chest, magnifying every creak of stone underfoot. Locals warn that wandering the ruins alone after sunset is not wise, though no one explains exactly why. As darkness approaches, the pyramids melt into one colossal shadow, the ancient streets contracting in the fading light, and one can't help but wonder, what remains in Teotihuacan when the living depart, and do the spirits of a forgotten civilization still watch over their city? As the sun sets over these forgotten towns, their silence feels heavier, almost alive, carrying whispers of lives long vanished. Each abandoned street, crumbling building, and haunted ruin tells a story of hope, fear, and sudden departure. From lava-scorched villages to partially submerged churches and ancient cities whose secrets refuse to fade, Mexico's hidden places hold mysteries that no history book fully captures. So when you wander these empty streets or gaze upon their shadows, ask yourself, what truly lingers when the living are gone, and are we ever really alone among the ghosts of the past?